I think that at this point, everybody that's been with us thus far can see that after the description of the pastimes of Lord Varaha, we stopped for some time, and then we started up again with the conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And Maitreya backtracked a little bit and described a bit more about Lord Brahma's creation. In these lessons that we'll review today, chapter 21 is talks between Kardama and Manu. And at the beginning of that chapter, Vidura inquires more specifically about the line of Manu and how that populated the universe. But more specifically, I wanted everybody just to bring it to note that this is the seed to the pastimes and leelas of the Lord's incarnation as Kapila Dev. It starts right there when he asks that question about Manu's descendants. Just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, or in the Ramayana, or in Krishna book and 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes the personalities that appear prior to the Lord's appearance. We have Jagannath Misra and Sachi, Vasudeva, Devaki, the Yadu dynasty, Kashyapa, Aditi, so many different parents and elders of the Lord who appear prior to his incarnation, prior to his descent. So that's pretty much what happens in Srimad Bhagavatam now. And until the entire end of the third canto, it will more or less be the pastimes of Lord Kapila Dev. So let us proceed, dive deep into these pastimes of Lord Kapila Dev. This is the October 2022 review of lessons 3 and 4. Samapriya, you want to pick someone to read, please?
Yes, Mandantara. Let's start with you today. First, I want to wish everyone a happy Kartik. It's a happy, very happy time for the devotees to see the devotion of others when they're offering their light to the Lord. So I just wanted to remind everyone that this is a very auspicious month, and a very auspicious month also to read the Bhagavatam. So, Mamatar, why don't you begin?
Chapter 20, texts 40 through 43. The glorious Brahma next evolved from his sloth, the ghosts and friends, but he closed his eyes when he saw them stand naked with their hair scattered. The ghosts and hobgoblins took possession of the body thrown off in the form of yawning by Brahma, the creator of the living entities. This is also known as the sleep, which causes drooling. The hobgoblins and ghosts attack men who are impure, and their attack is spoken of as insanity. Recognizing himself to be full of desire and energy, the worshipful Brahma, the creator of the living entities, evolved from his own invisible form from his navel, the host of Sadyas and Pitas. The Pitas themselves took possession of the invisible body, the source of their existence. It is through the medium of this invisible body that those well-versed in the rituals offer oblations to the Sadyas and Pitas in the form of their departed ancestors on the occasion of Shraddha.
Just one slight edit. It's not friends, it's fiends.
Acha.
Ghosts and fiends.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Okay, thank you. So, Pati, do you have something to add to this?
No, there's a purport coming up in the next slide.
Okay,
So let's discuss it.
let's go on. Vaishnavi, are you with us? Sometimes she is not. Okay. Madhurya Leela, would you like to read? Madhurya. Okay, she's not.
Yeah, I sent a message that I can't. I'll be listening today.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank
Thanks. Sorry.
you. Eka Radhika, how about you? Would you like to read?
Yes, Yes, Mataji, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Ghosts and mischievous hobgoblins are also the creation of Brahma. They are not false. All of them are meant for putting the conditioned soul into various miseries. They are understood to be the creation of Brahma under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Shraddha is a ritualistic performance observed by the followers of the Vedas. There is a yearly occasion of 15 days when ritualistic religionists follow the principle of offering oblations to departed souls. Thus, those fathers and ancestors who, by freaks of nature, might not have a gross body for material enjoyment, can again gain such bodies due to the offering of Shraddha, oblations, by their descendants. The performance of Shraddha, or offering oblations with prasad, is still current in India, especially at Gaya, where oblations are offered at the lotus feet of Vishnu in a celebrated temple, because the Lord is thus pleased with the devotional service of the descendants. By his grace, he liberates the condemned souls of forefathers who do not have gross bodies, and he favors them to again receive a gross body for development of a spiritual advancement. Hare Krishna.
You know,
Can
it's-
anyone guess what this is, this photo, this image? Anybody know? When Lord Chaitanya's father passed away, Jagannath Misra, you may remember from Chaitanya Lila, that he went to this temple of Gaya. It's in Uttar Pradesh, kind of close to Varanasi. And this is the footprint of Lord Vishnu. What happened was that there was a demon named Gaya Sura, and Krishna subdued him by pushing his foot and the demon all the way into the earth, and his footprint was left there. So that's the footprint of the Lord, and these are various garlands and offerings. And what happens is that it's a famous place for people to go and worship their ancestors and offer them this Shraddha ceremony. The idea being that, just as we read in the previous verses, Lord Brahma created ghosts and subtle beings. You can't see them. Ghosts, hobgoblins took possession. It says the Pitas themselves took possession of this invisible body, the source of their existence. It is through the medium of this invisible body that those well-versed in the rituals offer oblations to the Sadyas and Pitas in the form of departed ancestors on the occasion of Shraddha. I know that the Jewish religion also has this concept of some connection. In one lecture we studied earlier, I believe it was Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explained that people in the modern age have no idea about a person's connection with their previous ancestors in a real concrete way. But on the subtle plane, all these things are there in another dimension that we don't experience with our material senses. So if a person dies, say, for example, suicide, it's said in the Vedas that because that person misused the body to such an extent that they killed it, then the punishment is that they no longer get a material body with senses to experience interaction with the material elements, which brings satisfaction and fulfillment of desires. They only have the desires without the instruments to fulfill them. So it's a very frustrating, difficult experience to be in a ghost or subtle body without a material body to actually fulfill the desires. So the idea here is that a descendant of one of those persons, often it's mentioned with kings, that they're so anxious to have children, to have sons specifically, so that when the person dies, the son goes to Gaya or performs this Shraddha ceremony. You may also remember that Advaitacharya offered the Shraddha ceremony, performed this ceremony and offered the prasadam to Haridas Thakur. So offering that prasadam to the ancestors during this ceremony, it's mentioned here, that the Lord becomes pleased, because the Lord is thus pleased with the devotional service of the descendants, by his grace, he liberates the condemned souls of the forefathers who do not have gross bodies, and he favors them to again receive a gross body for development of spiritual advancement. So it gives us more of an insight into the creation of Brahma and the 8,400,000 different types of life forms. Some of them are actually invisible to the senses.
Premananda, do you want to say something, Prabhu?
Yeah, I have a question. So this Shraddha ceremony is more like a Vedic ritual. So as devotees who are chanting the holy name of the Lord, do we really have to go through this ritual? I ask this because there are two schools of thought in ISKCON, especially devotees who are from Indian background. They do strictly follow this Shraddha ceremony. But if you speak to Western disciples, they say, no, it's not needed. We are chanting the holy name of the Lord. That's above all Vedic rituals, so we really don't have to. So what's the correct interpretation? We'll just go by what Mahaprabhu did and Advaita Acharya did. Just a correct
Well,
example.
there's references and information for both sides. For example, when Lord Nrsingadev killed Hiranyakasipu, this is the one that I think gets quoted the most. When he asked Prahlad, you know, you stayed so firm in your devotion to me. I'm very pleased with you. Please ask for some benediction. And Prahlad said, no, I didn't serve you because I wanted some business dealings with you, and I wanted something in reciprocation. But if you can offer me something and you're offering, then I pray that my father be liberated, even though he was a demon and gave him so much difficulty.
Right.
If you're not speaking, please mute.
Suksha Lakshma Priya. Suksha Lakshma. If you could, she's driving a truck.
Oh, okay.
Prabhuji, you could
Very cool.
hello, my darling. Mute yourself if you're not speaking, okay?
Thank you.
It's nice to see you here, dear sister. Hare Krishna.
I didn't know I was on. Let me, I'm
Okay,
not sure how to do this even.
or just mute somehow.
Down on the left corner of the screen, there's a little microphone that says mute.
All right,
Done.
she turned, okay.
So Lord Nrsingadev replied that there's no need to ask for this benediction because you're my devotee, you're a pure devotee, 13 generations or 14 generations before and after you will all be liberated because of your devotion. So the one concept is that by serving the Lord, you're also serving your family members, just like that example of serving the stomach and the body gets nourished, or watering the root of a tree, the entire branches get fulfilled. So that's one side of it. And as you mentioned, Premananda, on the other side, Lord Chaitanya himself performed this ceremony. So it has to be considered important if one has facility.
I'd like to say something about that. These ritualistic activities, if they're done with devotion to Krishna, then it is a very nice way to worship. This is recommended in the Vedas. These are not haphazard activities that have just come about. It's not only tradition. If it's recommended in the Vedas, we find that most things that are recommended in the Vedas, if we do it as devotional service to Krishna, then it's purifying for everyone. But if it's just as a ritualistic activity, and there's no, either materialistic end or just being performed for tradition, then it doesn't have much value as far as spiritual advancement goes. So these are not things that one should automatically neglect, thinking that we're on a high platform. First of all, we're trying to become devotees, and it might help. Of course, when there's a Shraddha ceremony, there's some feeling of remorse for your relative who's gone, so you want to dovetail that in worshiping Krishna for their benefit. So it shouldn't be just thrown away, I don't think. And also another thing I want to mention about this particular there was one thing in the purport that Prabhupada was saying, that these living entities are meant to give the conditioned souls misery.
Mm.
So, and we see it in the first part of the creation, Lord Brahma is creating all these living entities that are demoniac, and it's a really interesting to observe that that is the nature of the material world, and that is where we come to try to lord it over.
Thank you.
Tisha wanted to say something real quick. Tisha.
Thank you, Mataji. I was just going to say the Native American culture too. They believe what they do affects 7 generations up and 7 generations back. That's like 14 altogether. That's kind of cool.
Oh, there you go. Very good. Okay. I think we're still hearing you, Suzanne.
Okay.
Okay. Shall we continue reading now? Let's go on with Tisha. Why don't you read?
Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:20, verse 44. Then Lord Brahma, by his ability to be hidden from vision, created the Siddhas and Vidyaharas and gave them that wonderful form of his known as the Antardana. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Antardana means that these living creatures can be perceived to be present, but they cannot be seen by vision. One day, Brahma, the creator of the living entities, beheld his own reflection in the water, and admiring himself, he evolved Kimpurushas as well as Kinnaras out of that reflection. The Kimpurushas and Kinnaras took possession of that shadowy form left by Brahma. That is why they and their spouses sing his praises by recounting his exploits at every daybreak. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The time early in the morning, 1.5 hours before sunrise, is called Brahma Muhurta. During this Brahma Muhurta, spiritual activities are recommended. Spiritual activities performed early in the morning have a greater effect than in any other part of the day.
Thank you. That's so true. Thank you. Does anyone have something to say about that? Waking up early before the sun rises, 1.5 hours before the sun rises. It's so spiritually healthy to go outside and no one's around and you see the sky, and so wonderful.
And especially in the month of Kartik.
Oh, yes. That's very good. Someone else wanted to say? Thank you, Premanand.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, by personal experience, I have noticed how the japa, the chanting flows in the morning much more easier than at night. It's so hard, and so you can experience the difference yourself.
Well, I could say that it depends upon how many rounds you chant. If you chant your first 16 in the morning and your last 16 at night, you're raring to go. By the time the night comes, you're in another world. Hare Krishna. Now
Did
let's
Tisha have something to say?
Tisha, do you want to say something? I think she.
I just feel like it's a trick because that's the best sleeping time, but you have to force yourself to get up.
Oh, you go to sleep early. It's all scientific. You have to manipulate it. Okay. Let's go on with Shyam Govindaji. Would you like to read, Shyam? Shyam Govinda. He is there. I just saw him. Shyam Govinda, are you there?
You have to unmute, perhaps.
Unmute, Shyam. He probably stepped out for 1 minute, so we'll come back to him. Who is Marco Di Koenig? Oh, there you are, Shyam.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Don, please read.
20:47:48. Once Brahma lay down with his body stretched at full length. He was very concerned that the work of creation had not proceeded apace, and in a sullen mood he gave up that body too. O dear Vidura, the hair that dropped from that body transformed into snakes. And even while the body crawled along with its hands and feet contracted, there sprung from it ferocious serpents and nagas with their hoods expanded. Keep going.
Yes, please.
49 and 51. One day, Brahma, the self-born, the first living creature, felt as if the object of his life had been accomplished. At that time, he evolved from his mind the Manus, who promote the welfare activities of the universe. The self-possessed creator gave them his own human form. On seeing the Manus, those who had been created earlier, the demigods, the Gandharvas, and so on, applauded Brahma, the Lord of the universe. They prayed, "O creator of the universe, we are glad. What you have produced is well done. Since ritualistic acts have been established soundly in this human form, we shall all share the sacrificial oblations."
Right. Well, the next slide is, I think, the purport to that. Oh, we're almost finished here. Do you have any comment on that? You seemed very enthusiastic when you read the prayer.
That's how Dhruva Maharaj Puru actually read it on his audio. So maybe he can speak about what he was feeling.
Okay. I don't know where he went. Patti? All right. Well, we're going to have a conversation because he stepped out for 1 second.
I didn't. Yeah.
Oh, you
I'm here.
didn't?
Yeah.
Oh, he's there. So what do you have to say about that? Because
Just
it
that
seems
in
to be very dynamic.
Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, you remember that it's being described that how does it say? Be thou happy by this sacrifice. What we're doing now is this is actually coming to the conclusion of the description of Brahma's creation, the Visarga, way back at the beginning of the 3rd canto. You remember now the whole thing we've described, how Mahavishnu glanced, the Mahatattva became agitated, or the Pradhan became agitated, created the universes. Garbhodaksha Vishnu gave birth to Brahma. All the living entities were inside him. Brahma was born, and now all the living entities, the planets, the Gandharvas, the Kinnaras, the snakes, everybody's come out. And now finally the Manus came out. The Manus, they help to regulate the activities of humanity throughout the universe via their instructions of Manu Samhita. So the demigods, those who had appeared before the Manus, are praying, "O creator of the universe, we're glad. What you have produced is well done. Since ritualistic acts have now been established soundly in this human form, we shall all share the sacrificial oblations." And in that 3rd canto of Bhagavad Gita, it's described that rains come, nature itself acts in harmony when humanity performs the proper activities and lives in harmony with Vedic rites. That's why Kali Yuga, one of the reasons it's so difficult, is that in this age, people don't follow these rules and regulations. They live horrible, sinful lives, and therefore nature has some pretty hard kicks, as we know from no matter where you live. It gets difficult.
You know, this goes back to that point that we were discussing about the Shraddha ceremony or other ritualistic activities. They are all meant for the purification of living entity. And if they're done with the right consciousness, devotion to Krishna, then they can be very helpful in our own purification. That's what I just thought. That was a nice connection. Okay. So we only have one more slide left for this. So why don't you continue reading Shyam Govinda, and then we're going to go to the next chapter.
52 and 53. Having equipped himself with austere penance, adoration, mental concentration, and absorption in devotion, accompanied by dispassion, and having controlled his senses, Brahma, the self-born living creature, evolved great sages as his beloved sons. To each one of these sons, the unborn creator of the universe gave a part of his own body, which was characterized by deep meditation, mental concentration, supernatural power, austerity, adoration, and renunciation.
Okay, so you just read, you just had a child recently, well, recently a year ago, almost a year, I guess. So you
Yes.
understand that this, when Lord Brahma says, because of the absorption, he had his absorption in devotion and he had good progeny. So we see how important it is, if we're going to propagate, to be absorbed in devotion, to have good children.
Mm.
So I thought that was a nice connection. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the last week was talking about we were meditating on like what's the difference between being in passion and being in goodness, or what's the difference between the demonic conscious and the demigod, or the devotee. And so I was thinking about that, having just become a father, how important it is to separate what it is that's the difference. And yeah, so for me it was like being absorbed in something but not attached to it. And so that's really where I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, well, Krishna makes the parents attached so they won't neglect the children.
Okay.
But not that you develop attachment, your kid is not even a year old. I think you should stay attached a little.
Yeah, no,
But,
yeah.
but ultimately, you are raising this child as service to Krishna.
Okay.
That's the foremost thing. Whatever we do, if we remember that we're doing all of this for Krishna, make it devotional service, and that's the way to become. Because it's not, when you give it to Krishna, it's just like I always think of when the pujari is making an offering to the Lord.
Mm.
It's not that you taste it. You're giving it to the Lord, and then you don't. You're making an offering. You give it to Him for His pleasure. So in the same way, we are giving our children, we are giving all of the things that we endeavor to do, we're giving that to Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the consciousness I was looking for.
Yeah. Don't neglect your out of false renunciation. That's not going to do much.
One note here. These sons that came from Brahma are famous throughout the universe. They were produced from the good qualities in him. And I did a close-up here to show there's what was that, Kratu, Atri, Narad is down here, Pulastya, Angira. These are famous names we hear throughout the Vedas. They were actually produced by Brahma at the very beginning of creation, prior to any other beings. So their example of using the human form properly, the Kumars, is notable. So now we'll go on to chapter 21, the conversation between Manu and Kardama.
Okay, Vaishnavi, why don't you read starting here?
All right. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.21, 1 through 5. Vidura said, the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed. O worshipful sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. The two great sons of Swayambhuva Manu, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, ruled the world, consisting of 7 islands, just according to religious principles. O holy Brahmana, O sinless one, you have spoken of his daughter, known by the name Devahuti, as the wife of the sage Kardama, the Lord of created beings. How many offspring did that great yogi beget through the princess, who was endowed with 8-fold perception in the yoga principles? Oh, pray tell me this, for I am eager to hear it. O holy sage, tell me how the worshipful Ruchi and Daksha, the son of Brahma, generated children after securing as their wives the 2 other daughters of Swayambhuva Manu.
Okay, I would like to ask a question. And there's a lot of reference here to family life. And Vidura, who has walked away from his family, now he wants to hear about this. How can we understand that? Pati?
Actually, Premananda wrote a really nice forum entry with some details about that. Premananda, you want to share?
Yeah, so in the forum, the question was, which we are going to talk later on, that Kardama Muni first prayed to the Lord and said that those who are unintelligent, they pray to the Lord for material benedictions. But in the very next prayer, he prayed to the Lord for a wife of similar disposition. And the topic of the forum post was, is it conflicting? On one hand, Kardama Muni is asking for, saying that one should not pray for material benedictions, and on the other hand, he did pray for a good wife. And if we go to Shikshashtaka prayer, Lord Chaitanya said, "Na dhanam, na janam, na sundari." I do not want wealth. I do not want followers. I do not want a beautiful wife. So how do we interpret this? So the conclusion is that if we begetting children for the sake of Krishna consciousness is not, it's actually recommended, because in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, sex life according, I am the sex life according to religious principles. And if we look at our line of acharyas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a grihastha, and Srila Prabhupada was a grihastha, and in Gaur Lila, lots of those devotees are grihasthas. So having household life and maintaining a family life is not at all contradictory to religious principles, as long as we're all practicing Krishna consciousness. So that's the correct way to interpret it. So that's what I wrote in the forum post.
Okay. Anyone else have something to say about that?
I actually have something.
Okay.
My father used to say, apples don't fall far from the trees. And so just like when we hear about the progeny from great persons, we're actually hearing about the great persons, or we're going back through the lineage, just like we do when we offer through our gurus. So it's glorifying those who have come before and have been great examples.
Yeah. A family life based on Krishna consciousness is certainly glorious. It's certainly glorious. Actually, it says in the Krishna book, Prabhupada said that when it was in reference to the trees being very happy when they saw their relative, the flute, in Krishna's hands and being played. And in the same way, when parents of devotee children, they become very happy to see their children engaged in service to Krishna. So that's also very wonderful. That has to be encouraged, I think.
It's interesting, in Bhagavad Gita, at the end of the first chapter, you remember that Arjuna's main argument, one of the main arguments, was that if all the warriors are killed, then the women who are their wives are going to be unprotected. And it's going to create unwanted progeny, unwanted children, Varna Sankara, which will create a hellish situation in society. So contrast what happened after the Battle of Kurukshetra up to today. Look at the world today and the difficulties being developed all over the world by improper family units, as opposed to or contrasted to this example of Kardama Muni, Devahuti, Ruchi, Daksha, all the different progenitors of mankind in Satya Yuga. One of the things that a nice realization I think I got was that Kapila Dev, this is the beginning of creation. Of course, we've already read about Lord Varaha, but Lord Kapila Dev will actually impart knowledge. Lord Varaha killed Hiranyaksha and lifted the earth. He did impart knowledge. It's the Varaha Purana to Mother Earth. But also Lord Kapila Dev is famous from the beginning of the creation as the propounder of Sankhya philosophy. So his teachings are actually here from the beginning of the creation all the way through it via the Vedas. So family life and how it should be performed properly in Krishna consciousness is very important.
Thank you. Okay, that's a very perfect explanation. And why don't you continue reading, Premananda?
Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21-6. The great sage Maitreya replied, commanded by Lord Brahma to beget children in the worlds, the worshipful Kardama Muni practiced penance on the bank of the river Saraswati for a period of 10,000 years. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is understood herein that Kardama Muni meditated in yoga for 10,000 years before attaining perfection. Therefore, yoga practice can be successfully performed by persons who have a very long duration of life, such as 100,000 years. In that way, it is possible to have perfection in yoga. Otherwise, there is no possibility of attaining the real perfection. Following the regulations, controlling the senses, and practicing the different sitting postures are merely the preliminary practices. We do not know how people can be captivated by the bogus yoga system in which it is stated that simply by meditating 15 minutes daily, one can attain the perfection of becoming one with God. This age, Kali Yuga, is the age of bluffing and quarrel. Actually, there is no possibility of attaining yoga perfection by such paltry proposals. The Vedic literature, for emphasis, clearly states 3 times that in this age of Kali, Kalau nastyeva, 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 there is no other alternative, no other alternative, no other alternative than Harinama, chanting the holy name of the Lord.
Oh, that's perfect. You have something to say about that, Premananda?
Well, I wanted to mention about the holy name, but it's already mentioned in the purport because that's the highest yoga practice. And in Bhagavad Gita 6:47, Lord Krishna summarizes the yogic instruction by saying that of all the yogis, the highest is one who always meditates on Lord Krishna, yoginam api sarvesham. So that's the highest platform of yoga, to always remember the Lord through the process of chanting and hearing. So that's the highest yoga. For the other yoga practices, as mentioned here, meditating for 10,000 years, it's not possible. I cannot even meditate for 10 minutes, forget about 10,000 years.
Well, you can meditate when you're chanting.
Yes.
Right? Yes,
Not
because
like
you have
that.
to have something to put in the mind.
Yes. Right.
Tisha, thank you, Premanandaji.
Thank you.
Tisha,
I have a question. Maybe this is silly, but so was Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyakashipa were already born, and then Kardama Muni meditates for 10,000 years? And what's the timeline? Where is Hiranya? Because we haven't heard the story yet about Nrsinga, but
Hati, you want to take that?
From the sounds of it, it does appear that because you may remember when Brahma created Manu, the first Manu is Swayambhuva. And when he created him, he said, now you please regulate the activities of the living entities so that they can properly follow a progressive path. Manu's response was, all right, I'll do exactly what you say, but what should I do about this planet where they're all living? It's in the ocean. So the pastime of Lord Varaha in the Sveta Varaha form of lifting the earth to make it again habitable for the living entities happened prior. That happened just after Manu was born. Now, after he appeared. Now he has a daughter, and we're going to read about the pastime of Kardama Muni and Manu. So yes, this is after Varaha. But to answer your question about Hiranyakasipu, what happened was that after his brother Hiranyaksha was killed by the Lord, Hiranyakasipu became furious, and he became bitterly angry and asuric in his bhav, in his mood toward the Lord. And he wanted to become immortal. So he went and performed great austerities and penances. So for the time being, while he is performing his penances and austerities, he's kind of out of the picture. But we'll hear about him later in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and connect the whole thing back.
Now, how long did he perform those austerities?
Don't remember. Anybody else?
Over 10,000 years.
A long time.
Yeah.
He actually, his austerities became so terrible and intense that flames started to come out of his head and burn the universe. And Brahma came and benedicted him. That's when the whole thing happened, where he said, I want to be immortal. And he said, I can't do that. I'm not immortal. And then he asked for so many different benedictions.
So that was when everyone lived for 100,000 years. Because you would wonder, okay, his wife was pregnant with Prahlad. That seems to be pregnant for a long time. But things are all relative. That was the Satya Yuga. Okay. Let's go on with Akshara. Akshara Prabhu, would you like to read? You want to put on the screen?
Yep.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Chapter 21, verse 7. During that period of penance, the sage Cardamom, by worship through devotional service in trance, propitiated the personality of Godhead, who is a quick bestower of all blessings upon those who flee to him for protection. Purport. Whether one practices yoga or speculates or does research to find God, one's efforts must be mixed with a process of devotion. Without devotion, nothing can be perfect. The target of perfection and realization is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly said that one who constantly engages in Krishna consciousness is the topmost yogi. The personality of Godhead, Hari, also fulfills the desires of his surrendered devotee. One has to surrender unto the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, Hari, of Krishna, in order to achieve real success. Devotional service or engagement in Krishna consciousness is the direct method, and all other methods, although recommended, are indirect.
Wow, that's very, very. So we're going to have Faye read this, but Akshara, I wanted to ask you to comment on that in reference to the previous purport when Srila Prabhupada is saying Nasteva, Nasteva, Nastevya about the chanting of the holy name. You want to put it back on the screen? Would that be easier, Pati?
No, that's okay.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, well, Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva. That verse refers to Kali Yuga, isn't it?
Yes.
In the age of Kali Yuga, the chanting of the holy names. So that is, of course, most relevant for us today.
Mhm.
However, Kadama Muni is from a different time, not from Kali Yuga, but from just the opposite, a very different time, where the process for perfection in devotion was meditation, and that's what he did.
Right. Pati,
Prabhu, there's a nice section in the beginning of the purport here. Maybe you can cover that in conjunction with what you just said, Akshara, Prabhu. Whether one practices yoga.
Okay. Well, what emerges from that is a little bit difficult topic. I very often encounter questions on that, because on the one hand here, in Satya Yoga with Kadama Muni, he's practicing bhakti, right? Or is he practicing jnana yoga?
No.
Because in the process of the process for perfection in Satya Yoga is meditation. So my understanding is, for perfection, he is a bhakta, obviously, but his process is meditation. On the other hand, you have the four basic yogas that Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita, one of which is dhyana yoga. That is not bhakti, and that is meditation. So very often there's some discussion about this. So is meditation actually dhyana yoga or is it bhakti?
Well, it depends upon what you're meditating on. Obviously, he was meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he appeared before him, riding on Garuda's back, standing up, but displaying his whole beautiful form. So he doesn't appear to everyone, incidentally, like that. So this Kadama Muni was engaged fully in devotional service, and it says here in the purport.
Fortunately, the next part of the purport will explain this. Go ahead, son.
This nothing can be achieved. The perfection of jnana yoga will not be achieved unless there's devotion to God, unless there's devotion to Krishna. So jnana yoga without reference to Krishna is incomplete. It's impersonalism. And what is the purpose of it? You see, that's what I'm getting from all of this.
However, In the Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, where Krishna explains Dhyana Yoga. If you read the verses, it seems bhakti. The yogi meditates about the super soul. He is
Yeah.
in love with Krishna, but Krishna describes this as Dhyana Yoga.
Okay, well, that's the
Isn't it?
perfection. That's the perfection of Jnana Yoga.
Yes.
Isn't that would be it? The perfection of everything is based on devotion to Krishna. Without that devotion to Krishna, then everything is incomplete. Is that all right? I agree with you with that about
It's
that.
a little bit confusing.
That reminded me of the analogy of the sun, and the level of understanding. It puts them in different levels. It puts them like the impersonal Brahman, and then Paramatma, and then the personality of Godhead, like the sunshine and the sun disk and entering the sun. So it seems like he's explaining, even in the Bhagavad Gita, about those being in different levels.
Well, then you have to discuss that word level, because it's often said that Brahmati, Paramatmati, Bhagavanyati, Subhyate, that the each one is Krishna, but it must be said that Bhagavan is the supreme. We have this thing in the material world. We're always measuring and judging, and we can't conceive of something being perfect and another thing being perfect. But having said that, devotion to Krishna is the most perfect.
No, it's actually also described in that verse and in that whole concept about Vedanti tat tat vavidas tat vamyad jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabdite. It's fluffed out in the Chaitanya Charitamrita further. According to the practice one performs, the path one treads to try to attain perfection will lead them to a particular feature of the absolute truth. Those who follow Gyan Yoga will be reciprocated according to their approach. Someone who follows Dhyan Yoga will be reciprocated according to their approach. And of course, the most intimate personal relationship is through Bhakti Yoga. And that's what's being described here, that there has to be some bhakti, some devotion to God, some sense of service. The spirit soul by constitution, by its very nature, is a servant of the Supreme. So whatever path one follows, there has to be some of that included in it. Otherwise, it won't yield any proper fruit.
Okay.
And this will be described further now about Kardama Muni specifically.
Okay, let's go on with the rest of the purport. Is that all right? And Faye, why don't you read?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Purport continued. In this age of Kali, the direct method is especially more feasible than the indirect because people are short-living, their intelligence is poor, and they are poverty-stricken and embarrassed by so many miserable disturbances. Lord Chaitanya, therefore, has given the greatest boon. In this age, one simply has to chant the holy name of God to attain perfection in spiritual life. The words Sampradaya Harim mean that in various ways, Kardama Muni satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, by his devotional service. Devotional service is also expressed by the word Kriya Yogena. Kardama Muni not only meditated but also engaged in devotional service. To attain perfection in yoga practice or meditation, one must act in devotional service by hearing, chanting, remembering, etc. Remembering is meditation also. But who is to be remembered? One should remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. not only must one remember the Supreme Person, one must hear about the activities of the Lord and chant his glories. This information is in the authoritative scriptures. After engaging himself for 10,000 years in performing different types of devotional service, Kardama Muni attained the perfection of meditation. But that is not possible in this age of Kali, wherein it is very difficult to live for as much as 100 years.
Okay. Any comment on that?
I think this answers our previous question. It's the infusion of devotional service
Yeah.
into meditation, into your service. That's where the thrust of everything really is. No wonder he did well in meditation.
Yeah, you can't see
He not only did
Krishna
it
if
for
your
10,000
meditation.
wonderful years, right? 10,000 years of thinking of Krishna. I mean, how wonderful could it get?
That sounds pretty good. Thank you. Shall we go on now? How about Chaitamayi? Would you like to read?
Yes, Mataji. Hari Bol, everyone.
Wow.
Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21-8. Then in the Satya Yuga, the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, being pleased, showed himself to that Kardama Muni and displayed his transcendental form, which can be understood only through the Vedas. Purport. Here, 2 points are very significant. The first is that Kardama Muni attained success by yoga practice in the beginning of Satya Yuga, when people used to live for 100,000 years. Kardama Muni attained success, and the Lord, being pleased with him, showed him his form, which is not imaginary. Sometimes the impersonalists recommend that one can arbitrarily concentrate one's mind on some form he imagines or which pleases him. But here it is very clearly said that the form which the Lord showed to Kardama Muni by his divine grace is described in the Vedic literature. Shabdam Brahma. The forms of the Lord are clearly indicated in the Vedic literature. Kardama Muni did not discover any imaginary form of God, as alleged by rascals. He actually saw the eternal, blissful, and transcendental form of the Lord.
Okay, Chaita, what do you think of that?
It's nice to know that there is a bona fide form that is beyond our own speculation and it is given in the Vedas. And so if we think that we've seen God, we have a nice reference point.
That's true too.
I'm appreciating the painting here that Dhruva Maharaj has given us. This is great. First, you had just the focus on Kardama Muni, and now you've expanded it to the full painting, and we see Krishna entering on Garuda. That's fantastic and absolutely valid. And it's this. So there is so much doubt within the impersonal community about what is real and what's not real. And because we have access to the Vedic foundation, then we can know that these forms that he's seeing and that are described here in many chapters of the Bhagavatam, these are for real, and you can bank on them.
Right. He did not discover any imaginary form of God as alleged by the rascals. And of course, when we go to the temple, that's a bona fide form of the Lord, you know. The mind wants to see a form of the Lord. You know, why it's a natural desire. We're not basically impersonal. We want to have a loving relation. We want to see the beautiful form of the Lord. Okay, thank you, my darling. Let's go on, shall we, Patti? With Gopa Patni. Would you like to read Gopa?
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21, 9 through 11. Kardama Muni saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is free from material contamination in his eternal form, effulgent like the sun, wearing a garland of white lotuses and water lilies. The Lord was clad in spotless yellow silk, and his lotus face was fringed with slick, dark locks of curly hair. Adorned with a crown and earrings, he held his characteristic conch, disc, and mace in 3 of his hands and a white lily in the 4th. He glanced about in a happy, smiling mood, whose sight captivates the hearts of all devotees. A golden streak on his chest, the famous Kaustubha gem, suspended from his neck, he stood in the air with his lotus feet placed on the shoulders of Garuda.
Why don't we go on with the next slide, and Gopa continue reading the purport.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The varieties of the transcendental Lord, his body, his form, his dress, his instruction, his words, are not manufactured by the material energy, but all are confirmed in the Vedic literature. By performance of yoga, Kardama Muni actually saw the Supreme Lord as he is. There was no point in seeing an imagined form of God after practicing yoga for 10,000 years. The perfection of yoga, therefore, does not terminate in voidness or impersonalism. On the contrary, the perfection of yoga is attained when one actually sees the personality of Godhead in his eternal form. The process of Krishna consciousness is to deliver the form of Krishna directly. The form of Krishna is described in the authoritative Vedic literature, Brahma Samhita. His abode is made of Chintamani stone, and the Lord plays there as a cowherd boy and is served by many thousands of gopis. These descriptions are authoritative, and Krishna conscious person takes them directly, acts on them, preaches them, and practices devotional service as enjoined in the authoritative scriptures.
Wow, beautiful, right? This is what Chaitanya was referring to also.
Jai Prabhupada.
Haribo?
I said, Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada. So what do you think? What do you think, Gopa, about this?
That's just what Prabhupada says, you know, these descriptions. Whoops. Well, I was going to read that last line.
Go back, Patti. She wanted to refer to that.
It's okay.
No, there you go. Go on.
Like the last line that a Krishna conscious person takes them directly, acts on them, preaches them, and practices devotional service as enjoined in authoritative scriptures.
See, this you go on.
Person Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
You know, just establishing, you know, who to follow.
The authoritative scriptures.
Yeah.
This is so important. And this takes us back to the very beginning when Premananda asked that question. We were talking about Shraddha. We have all of the information delivered by the pure devotee.
Yes,
So
we have his address. We know his mother. We know his father. We have his address.
Yes,
I love that lecture.
Yeah, we are knowing these things. But Prabhupada himself, he's the pure devotee, and he's giving us the absolute truth based on the authoritative scriptures. And that's why we're always asking for references. If you can't back up, actually, Prabhupada said, it's a great quote, in all spiritual circles, quoting your references is essential.
Yes.
Essential. We have to quote where we got things. And if it's from the authorized Vedic scriptures, that's trustworthy. We can, it's worthy of our of our faith and our attention. And then we can preach it to everyone because we know it's the truth.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, let's see if we can finish this section now. Ian, would you like to read next?
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Ian.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. Srimad
Hare Krishna.
Bhagavatam 3.21, 12 to 13. Now, when Kardama Muni actually realized the supreme personality of God in person, he was greatly satisfied because his transcendental desire was fulfilled. He fell on the ground with his head bowed to offer obeisances on the lotus seat of the Lord. His heart, naturally full of love of God, with folded hands, he satisfied the Lord with prayers. The great sage Kadama said, O supreme worshipful Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of the sight of you, who are the reservoir of all the existences. Through many successive births of deep meditation, advanced yogis aspire to see your transcendental form.
All right. Go on, Ian.
Okay.
Finish this.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kadama Muni says, Your Lordship is the reservoir of all that can be understood by the nomenclature of goodness, and by our experiencing you face to face, the perfection of sight has now been attained. These statements are the pure devotional situation. For a devotee, the perfection of the senses is to engage in the service of the Lord. The sense of sight, when engaged in seeing the beauty of the Lord, is perfected. The power to hear, when engaged in hearing the glories of the Lord, is perfected. The power to taste, when one enjoys by eating prasad, is perfected. When all the senses engage in relationship with the personality of Godhead, one's perfection is technically called Bhakti Yoga, which entails detaching the senses from material indulgence and touching them to the service of the Lord.
Wonderful. Don't change the screen. That last sentence. Why don't you read that again, Ian? This is the culmination of everything, and why the scriptures are so important, and how we're learning to do just this. Read that last sentence, beginning with when.
Yeah. So when all the senses engage in relationship with the personality of Godhead, one's perfection is technically called Bhakti Yoga, which entails detaching the senses from material indulgence and attaching them to the service of the Lord.
Wonderful. And Sham Govinda, you can also see how this applies to being a new father, to engaging in devotional service in many, many varieties of ways. Everything that we do, we have a choice to do it materially or spiritually. So if we do it for Krishna, then we get purified and we become properly situated, using all our senses in his service. Ian, would you like to add to that?
Just a comment on our the famous Maharaj Ambarish, who used all his whatever he had at his disposal to serve the Supreme Lord.
Very good.
So this, yes, a good example of using all our senses, whatever we have in mind to serve the Supreme Lord. So Maharaj Ambarish, the good example.
Perfect. It's even stated in the Bhagavatam. There's a verse describing how he used all of his senses to serve Krishna. Excellent. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Does anyone else have something to add to this? The main point of self-realization is to use everything in the service of the Lord. See that? When all the senses engage in relationship with the personality of Godhead, one's perfection is technically called Bhakti Yoga, which entails detaching the senses from material indulgence and attaching them to the service of Krishna. It sounds so easy. It's one sentence. That is the perfection of life. It's amazing. Okay. So let's write that one on our hearts. Next, we will have Manvantara. Would you like to read again?
Text 14. Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane nations. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, there are two kinds of devotees, those who desire material pleasures and those who desire nothing but service to the Lord. Modern yogis advise that because one has senses, one must enjoy to the fullest extent like cats and dogs, yet one can go on and practice yoga. This is condemned here by Kardama Muni. He says that such material pleasures are available for cats and dogs in a hellish condition. The Lord is so kind that if so-called yogis are satisfied by hellish pleasures, he can give them facilities to attain all the material pleasures they desire. But they cannot attain the perfectional stage attained by Kardama Muni.
Whoa, what a thing to give up. See, there it is again. Use your senses for Krishna, you attain what Kardama Muni attained. You could actually see Krishna. He will reveal himself. There was another quote recently that if Krishna is pleased with your service, he will reveal himself to you. So I was wondering about that quote. And then Prabhupada said, I just heard him say, he actually said, I don't know why people think, they say, show me God, show me Krishna. What do you mean show you? He is present in the water. He is present in the sun. He is present in the moon. And we just have to let our eyes become aware of the places where he's present. He is actually revealing himself to us. We just have to link it up. Chaita, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Couple of things. First of all, I'd like to glorify my god sister Manvantara for the first class replies she has in the forum each week. It's really helpful, really concise. You understand the philosophy so nicely, beautifully.
Blessing.
The other thing is in this purport, it says that modern yogis advise that because one has senses, one must enjoy to the fullest extent. I'm noticing that lately this is a mantra that's recurring over and over in my conversations with friends and family members. Well, make sure you enjoy yourself. You're going on a trip, make sure you enjoy. That's the most important thing. And it's so inadvertent and so unconscious that is the whole purpose of our existence, is to enjoy. Wasn't there in a purport, Prabhupada said, we must extinguish this enjoying spirit. So that's my realization.
During
Wonderful.
Prabhupada's time or slightly after, there was that famous yogi, Rajneesh. The Rajneesh philosophy is that because you have senses, you should just enjoy them and use them to their fullest, and then gradually they'll burn out and that desire will be fulfilled. But in actuality, if anyone has any practical experience, they don't really get burnt out. They become degraded, but they still continue to burn with a desire for engagement. They never burn out. It doesn't happen. They may temporarily get tired and wasted, but again, shortly thereafter, we'll just come back again.
Well, we
Thank
have
you.
one more verse. Sorry. Teacher, why don't you read the next verse? Thank you, Chaitamayi.
I will.
This is the last verse in our review this week.
Okay, thank you. It's verse 15. Therefore, desiring to marry a girl of like disposition, who may prove to be a veritable cow of plenty in my married life, to satisfy my lustful desire, I too have sought the shelter of your lotus feet, which are the source of everything, for you are like a desire tree. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kardama Muni could have asked his benediction from Uma, for it is recommended in the scriptures that if anyone wants a good wife, he should worship Uma. But he preferred to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead because it is recommended in the Bhagavatam that everyone, whether he is full of desires, has no desire, or desires liberation, should worship the Supreme Lord. Of these three classes of men, one tries to be happy by fulfillment of material desires, another wants to be happy by becoming one with the Supreme, and another, the perfect man, is a devotee. He does not want anything in return from the personality of Godhead. He only wants to render transcendental loving service. In any case, everyone should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for he will fulfill everyone's desire. The advantage of worshiping the Supreme Person is that even if one has desires for material enjoyment, if he worships Krishna, he will gradually become a pure devotee and have no more material hankering.
Oh my, sounds like a good recipe. It's really good.
There was a forum, I think, Akshar, were you referring to this last sentence in your forum post?
So the last sentence. Yeah, I was mentioning the last sentence of the purport. Where is it?
Let's read it aloud.
Yeah, the advantage of worshipping the Supreme Person is that even if one has desires for material enjoyment, if he worships Krishna, he will gradually become a pure devotee and have no material hankering.
Boy.
So I think from the verses and the purports here, one could put Kardama Muni in two categories. And it seems for me that Prabhupada supports both. Once one is more inclined in that direction, once with other parts of his purports more into the other direction. So Kardama Muni could be completely pure, and his desire to marry is only for the service of Krishna. So he is a devotee who has no desires apart from serving Krishna. But he could also be seen to be in the category of a devotee who still has desires. And some parts of Prabhupada's purports seem to support this, like this purport, for example. Also the next verse, there's another purport. Same question comes up.
Nice. Any other comment? Anybody else? Because that's a good point. It's a very valid point. That when Samapriya and I were reading this and creating these course materials, we were a bit stunned that Srila Prabhupada's mood in this sections, coming up, this one with Kardama Muni, and then again with Manu, emperor of the world, emperor of the universe, emperor, the first king, are quite different. His mood, the purports, the whole text is quite different than most of the other writings and other books and other leelas and other topics. So yeah, it does sound very much like that. I like that both are there. Unmute.
Back to the last sentence in the previous purport, when we were talking about, where is it? Maybe it was, or maybe it's here. The worship is people, one before that. When all the senses engage in relationship with the personality of Godhead. So you would wonder, maybe these great saintly, these great saintly people who are the progenitors of the universe had material desires, maybe they did. But when we engage in our desires and our senses in the service of the Lord, that's purifying. And that one becomes self-realized eventually with no material desires. So it could be both.
Good. We'll also see that with Kardama Muni.
Right. I particularly like this, a cow of plenty. That's an interesting way to refer to someone, to fulfill his lusty desire for to prove to be veritable cow of plenty in my married life. So that's an interesting description of a wife. Hare Krishna. Okay, anyone else have something to say? Because that's the last verse that we're going to discuss today. Someone have a question or a comment about anything so far that we've discussed today?
I have a question from one of the previous verses, 3:20:12, when they're talking about the unseen activity of the living being, like
the
just to
unseen activity.
yeah, the unseen activity of the living being. As I was like reviewing to answer this week's forum, I was going back and I wasn't clear on what that was, the unseen activity of the living being that they're talking about in 3:20:12.
3:20. Well, from my understanding, I'll just say it and then my husband, maybe he can shed more light. Prabhupada gives an example of the soul. People don't believe in the soul because they can't see it. In the same way we have a mind, the mind is there, no one sees the mind. There are so many activities that are unseen that happen in the mind, that happen on the subtle platform, and the soul himself is unseen by material vision. So go on.
I think more specifically, Sama, 3:20:12 is the chapter previously. And we briefly
3:20. Oh my goodness.
We briefly overviewed it last week prior to my speaking. At the time of creation, when all the living entities are in the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, after the last devastation, their unseen activities, their desires are still inherent in them. So that's one of the purposes for creation, is to allow them to fulfill those desires. Am I right, Ekaradika, that it's describing the unseen activities of the living entities as part of creation, as one of the features?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, yeah. It's going up to that. Yeah, you're right.
So that's what that is. That's the collective desires of those living entities are called the unseen activities. They happened previously, and then they have to fulfill their desires. So they're still in the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, unmanifest until they can get bodies to fulfill those desires.
Thank you, Prabhu. That explains it. Thank you.
Very good.
Is
Okay.
everybody's pretty clear now with the whole sojourn? Because we are very definitely changing course in the narrative now. Creation is finished and completed, and now we're going deeper into the pastimes of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, who ultimately will have the Supreme Lord as their son. Dive deep into Lord Kapila Dev and his pastimes.
Wow, such wonderful instructions. Wonderful. Guaranteed to put us on the transcendental platform. I'm in. I know that. Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Oh, Premananda, did you have something to say?
Yes, a quick question. So at the end of second canto, there's a mention of 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Sarga, Visarga. So are we to assume that the Sarga part is over, the creation now is sub-creation? That's what Lord Brahma is doing right now?
Yes, this is
there a clear
Visarga.
Oh, the sub-creation.
Visarga, okay.
Yeah.
What was the first part of the question at the end of the second canto? What did it say?
The 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Sarga, Visarga.
Yeah.
So what we're studying right now is Visarga, right?
Visarga, yes. If you remember, Sarga was up to the point of like the creation of the Kumaras, who were a little bit of both. They came from Brahma's mental state. This was before Rudra. They came before him, but and it describes that they were kind of like that in-between place in the purport. And then
What do
from
you
then
mean a
on,
little bit of both? I don't understand. What's a little bit of both?
that he was just starting to come into the state of being able to create. So he was very much helped by the Lord. Of course, the Lord's doing everything ultimately. But Brahma's position as he begins to create and take over, we just read last week that he's almost an independent, powerfully creator. He's like considered the manager of a big firm. Prabhupada gave that example, that, you know, just give him the rein and let him do what he does so well. But at that time, he was just starting off. So the Lord was very much involved in it. I looked it up in Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur's comments, and that's where it described that.
I see. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Jai. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Everyone have a wonderful Govardhan
Yeah.
Puja.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.